While there's an abundance of native root vegetables which sustained Indigenous communities, more than 2 centuries after European settlement, few, if any, have been domesticated and marketed to the mainstream. That could be about to change in WA though, as a couple of vegetables have the fine food industry buzzing and Aboriginal-run farms positioning to grow and sell them. Here's Sean Murphy.
Jeff Woodall's neighbours reckon he has the worst farm in the district at Arthur River in the Great Southern region of Western Australia. And he chose the worst soil on the farm to grow this vegetable crop.
That's where we've sort of focused our cultivation work, is on those sort of poor sandy soils, which are pretty typical here in WA.
He's a native plant agronomist, and over the last 15 years he's looked at 200 different tubers or root vegetables commonly found in southern WA.
So the aim was to sort of screen those 200 species for potential new vegetable crops, and of those 200 species, there were 2 or 3 that looked as though they had some commercial potential.
One of the most promising crops is the youlk, or bush carrot.
Yeah, it's had a documented history of Indigenous use, so it gets over those sort of food safety issues, and it produces a lot of tubers in a small volume of soil that aren't too deep.
The youlk is a perennial species, so it's a low-cost crop once it's established. And importantly, Jeff Woodall says, it's a hit with the food industry.
I had a lot to do with the food industry to start with, and they pretty much said that they wanted things that were pleasant to eat. They didn't want to pay truffle prices for these native vegetables. They wanted them to be realistically priced. So the crop has to produce lots of tubers in a reasonable sort of time frame and have some sort of desirable horticultural attribute.
Not all of his on-farm trials have been so successful. Frost was just one problem when he tried to grow kulyu, a type of sweet potato, more commonly found further north in the rangelands of WA's Gascoyne and Murchison regions.
We planted it 3 times and it got frosted each time. And then when we came to excavate the tubers, as you can see here, the tubers are down way beneath the soil surface, and to be able to grow it commercially, you have to move such an amazing amount of soil that it just makes it uneconomic. So we had to look at some other methods of cultivating the species. As you can see there, that's the size of the tuber that it produces, and it's lovely to eat.
The solution was raised garden beds with a solid floor to prevent the kulyu from growing too deep. The original research started for the Department of Agriculture 15 years ago and continued with the University of Western Australia. It's now being funded by the National Research and Industry Development Corporation and the Great Southern Development Commission. The goal is to commercialise the crops and encourage Aboriginal communities to grow them.
Still fairly labour intensive, but at least it sort of proof of concept, and would work well with the Indigenous groups to have these sorts of beds, even if they were just doing it for their own consumption. It's not too labour intensive and using fairly simple materials to set up the beds. So we'd probably replant that one for the next year's crop. What we've been able to show is that there is a market for the products. The food industry would like to use them, but at this stage we don't really have a great supply of these new vegetables. But this is the last sort of 18 months has been a real turning point for the research and the development work, in that we're starting to have some product available for people, chefs, to access and to use, not just as a garnish but as a real vegetable.
Although we do cook this and put it on the coals, I prefer it raw. So we just shave it and just keep it pretty simple so that you actually get a lot of the flavour from this. You definitely get like that hint of carrot. It's also slightly herbaceous, like a light, I guess, dill. And then you get just a touch of eucalyptus at the end.
Paul Isco is the chef behind Further Foods, a pop-up restaurant venture turning bush tucker into fine dining.
So you're not going to find beef, pork, chicken, tomatoes, carrots on our menu. It's going to be youlk, kulyu, bloodroot, emu, kangaroo, marron, grubs, ants, those kind of things.
Further's chefs have taken their mobile kitchen to a range of exotic locations around WA. Today they're in Cranbrook in an old shearing shed at Dowreen Farm. They're making lunch at a field day for Indigenous landholders hoping to grow youlks and kulyu as part of a new business venture.
We've just got some kangaroo leg going on the plate now. We have some pickled youlk, some roasted youlk, and some kulyu, finishing off with some damper and smoked butter.
Indigenous landholders from Noongar communities across southern WA are taking the first steps towards forming a collective to grow and market the new vegetables.
So really it's about recognising the opportunity that a collective presents to us to work together in a cooperative framework to engage industry and supply chain opportunities really to value add to these assets. And so a diversified business model is what we're really about. All the amenities have been improved, the fencing's fixed, the degraded country has all been mapped and protected.
Kelly Flugie is the project manager for the Southern Agriculture Indigenous Landholder Service. He says there's a lot of excitement about the opportunity to develop a new industry.
It's really value adding to the potential of the land through diversification of products, but utilising traditional knowledge stuff. This is what people are really drawn to, they're really excited about, and it's really about how we can create or maximise the economic potential of these lands, and that equates simply to more business, more jobs.
Across southern WA, the National Indigenous Land Corporation has purchased more than a dozen farms on behalf of Aboriginal families and corporations. But the communities involved say they're hamstrung by the terms of the leasehold that's offered, and they're unable to realise the full potential of their farms. Dowreen Farm is pretty typical. It's been run by the Dudjimurup Twongkop Corporation since 1999. They've worked hard on improving the 700-hectare property, with new fencing, grain storage silos and tree planting to rehabilitate its poorer country. But for all of the major investments, they needed to get funding and permission from the corporation.
You've got to go back to the Indigenous Land Corporation and get permission to do those things. Long term, we want to be able to at least build a couple of homes around the farm so that people can come and live on the farm and own something. For me, I couldn't live on the farm because I had my own money and I built my own home in Cranbrook. If I'd have built it on the farm, it would have become part of the farm and I would have lost my money.
One of the corporation's most successful farms is Woolwich Maya near Albany. The Colbung family has developed a thriving prime lamb and timber enterprise here. After nearly 20 years of improvements, it's considered a showpiece, but it's still subject to caveats and conditions.
I think if you've been there long enough and if you put in the hard yard, you've done the improvements, that should be taken on board, and the government should say, well, fair enough, see, people are fair dinkum, they've done great improvements here, they've got vision for the future, and we should give them freehold title to the land.
Kelly Flugie says the big issue is that landholders can't borrow to invest in their farm businesses because they don't have freehold title.
We can get around that sometimes, and in some cases we have in the past, to get external investment in. But the problem is that while that exists, we can't raise commercial capital against the asset, and that's a major impediment for us. And that's what really fundamentally sets us apart from the mainstream farmer. He can go to the bank, Westpac, National Bank, wherever, and raise capital.
The Indigenous Land Corporation says it welcomes new ideas and ventures on its properties and can lift caveats in some cases to help landholders get bank loans. But these legal restrictions were an important safeguard to ensure land purchased for the National Indigenous Estate was not lost through bad decisions and investments.
What do you got here?
It's kangaroo, temperate, youlk.
No worries.
Freehold title may be a long-term goal, but in the meantime, growing a market for bush vegetables is well within reach. And to do that, Aboriginal landholders are targeting the fine food industry.
But for me, it's fantastic because you don't need to do a lot to it to make it taste amazing.
Yeah, I believe so. It's actually very nice. When it goes to your palate, you got an explosion of flavours that goes into it.
Vincenzo Velletri is a chef and promoter of Slow Foods Australia.
And we do have some...
Well, the thing is that we're looking at traditional food, and definitely Aboriginal food, the bush tucker is a traditional food. Of course, we probably today we don't look at the way that they were eating 200 years ago, so I can see the evolvement of that. But also what is important for us is to keep the food online, so to keep the food. Because with the time, this food is disappearing if nobody is going to look at it. So what we do, we make the food stays on the market by getting people to try the food, eat the food.
We've got 200 kilos of that. We can just...
Dale Tilbrook has been sourcing and selling bush foods for 15 years.
It's huge potential, and the time is absolutely right now because we have a lot of interest both locally and internationally in people experiencing local food produced by Aboriginal people. I would love to be able to have bush tucker barbecues and serve youlk or kulyu or some of our other different foods from here in the southwest. A bit difficult at the moment.
I think there's a great opportunity for Indigenous communities to be growing these or harvesting them, because every chef I talk to or people who come to our dinners are blown away by these, different tubers and like, where can we get them?
Yeah, so now's a good time to take tip cuttings, Reece.
Last year, Jeff Woodall gave cuttings from his youlk crop to Reece Bonshaw to establish his own crop at Dowreen Farm. 6 months on, he's had mixed success, but he's learned some valuable lessons.
It's slow going at the moment. We've planted our first lot of youlk a bit too close to where the water is, and they drowned in our last winter rains. But as we move progressively up the hill, it gets more sandier and sandier. And we're going to find that balance where the youlk are going to be absolutely thriving.
It's sort of like Indigenous knowledge coming together with Western agronomy for sort of agriculture and horticulture, putting them together so that you end up with a commercial product.
With Jeff Woodall's help, they're now growing youlks, native sandalwood, wattle seeds and quandongs at Dowreen Farm. And they're hoping the bush tucker paddock can be a resource for the new Growers Collective.
We're working on a memorandum of understanding at this point, but once I start proving that this youlk is going to become a bit more commercially viable, more successful, we're going to have the cuttings there to share amongst other Indigenous groups, then they will be able to see the bigger vision. And I'm sure that they'll all come on board, and then we'll be able to move forward and approach industry as one.
Even with a Growers Collective, vegetables like the youlk are likely to only be a specialty niche product for a long time to come. Jeff Woodall says he's barely scratched the surface of their potential.
It's very difficult to take a plant from the bush into commercial production with one or two research projects. There's a lot of questions still to be answered and a lot of work still to be done. We've still got lots of post-harvest treatment of the tubers and storage that needs to be worked out. And yeah, there's a myriad of things that need to be looked at.